last time we left off on this slide, which was talking about sugar. So take a step back and look at what we have to say about sugar. An expert panel, and this came from the American Heart Association, recommended that added sugars not be offered at all to children under age 2. So think about it for a minute. Think about all the sweetened foods that we might offer to kids. Not just desserts and sweetened beverages and whatever, but even mildly sweet items, even sweetened cereals, or even muffins that we make, and they've got quite a bit of sugar in them. Our American diet is really filled with lots of processed foods, and yet when we're trying to teach infants and toddlers how to eat in a healthful way, we've got to think about this and not offer them sugar. It's the biggest favor we can provide them. And I have to tell you, over the years, many of my students in my undergraduate programs say, you know what, my mom never let me have soda, and that's the best thing that ever happened to me. So most students are really grateful for the fact that they're raised in a healthy household that promotes healthful eating. They may not feel like it when they're kids, but it's a game changer. So no sugar is okay. So just, it's a paradigm shift here. And one thing to think about is products like yogurt. There are yogurt products marketed to kids, and the yogurt often has a lot of sugar in it, more than you should have for breakfast, right? The guidelines for adults are pretty low. I think for adult women, it's less than 6 teaspoons a day. And you can have 3 teaspoons in your yogurt without even thinking about it. So we don't want to give kids these sweetened foods. And what's so interesting about it is if you never give them to them, they're okay. If you give them, in fact, Greek yogurt, or regular whole milk yogurt, which is kind of bitter, and chop some fruit and put it in there, they like it. Many of the kids learn to like it because they haven't had yogurt with 4 teaspoons of sugar per 6 ounces, right? So you're in charge of getting them to accept these tastes that aren't loaded with sugar. Now, everybody's gonna want sugar later when your kids are, when the children are teenagers, young kids, when they learn about sugar, it's a lot like an addictive product like, drugs, because it's so yummy, and obviously animals, humans really respond to it. But if you can start them out early learning to like non-sweet foods, you've done them an enormous favor. So the reason that the American Heart Association has these guidelines is because sugar intake tracks to obesity and tracks to heart disease early on. Okay, it used to be that heart disease was something that happened to men after age 60. Now, risk factors for cardiovascular disease start much earlier and hit everybody. And this may be particularly poignant if you think about how at risk people are of COVID right now. If they have these comorbidities such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease or overweight, they're more likely to have a fatal response to COVID. So this is the first time we really had something so profound and so black and white show us how important it is. But we tend to get loosey-goosey with it, I think. We're used to sugar. Oh, what's a little bit of sugar? How does that hurt anything? But what happens then is people get used to it, and then a meal without sugar is something that's not palatable. So we have a lot of power here. So, and added sugars include table sugar, fructose, corn syrup, and honey. I'm going to call honey out again in a minute, but all infants, you should write this down. You're going to see again, but write it down. All infants, ages 0 to 1, should never be fed honey. Anybody know why?
Isn't it something to do with the components of honey that make it dangerous or something?
Yeah, so honey can have botulism spores that won't affect an adult at all, but an infant has a different GI tract. So from 0 to 12 months, their GI tract is a little more anoxic. It's different. The enzymes are different. environment's different. And so in that situation, the passage of time is different. So passage of information and not information, food stuff. So honey can actually pass slowly through GI tract, and the botulism toxins can be, the organism that causes botulism can grow and produce a toxin while in the gut of the infant. That's the issue. So no honey for kids under the age of 1. Having said that, if you have a baked item, which is full of sugar, and you shouldn't be doing that anyway, if the honey's been baked, it's probably okay. It's the honey out of the jar that you really need to worry about. But nonetheless, no sugar before the age of 2. It kind of seems radical, but it will change the lives of our country, the entire health outlook of our country if we follow these guidelines.
Somebody asked a question about fruit.
That's a different thing. So fruit is the answer. And I remember hearing this over the years and thinking, I don't really like fruit that much. But then I worked on developing a palate for it. And a lot of kids absolutely love fruit. And that's why we have this sweet tooth, because fruit is beneficial. It's got vitamin C and fiber and all these things that help us grow and energy. So fruit is spectacular. So fruit is good, right? Fruit juice, no, because what we do with fruit, we have all the cells and the water and fiber and everything, and let's say a peach or an apple, right? And then to make fruit juice, we squeeze everything out and we just take the sugar water out and call that food. That is a highly processed, high sugar substance. But the apple itself is great. And the thing is, if kids eat an apple, they're not going to eat 4 more apples because they're going to get full. Because whole foods make kids full. But if you gave them 4 apples worth of juice, they might be able to knock it back. So because there's no chewing, no satiety that happens. So yeah, fruit is okay. You got to be careful about choking hazards. You need to cut it like grapes. You need to cut them into halves or quarters. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. But fruit's a good thing. Fruit extracts, not so much. All right, fats. So I put some pictures here to exemplify what healthy fats are. I know you guys know this, but I think what happens with parents and in this different life stage is we forget that every calorie counts and that there are healthful sources of fats, and then there are ones that we don't have a lot of room for, okay? Especially with the obesity crisis. The last thing we want to do is fill up young children with macaroni and cheese, high in salt, white flour, high in fat. They probably put sugar in it too to make it taste better. So what you're doing is you're eating something that's not remotely the whole foods diet you're trying to get the kids to go to. So this is kind of taking a step back. What do we think about fats with young children? So first, they do not need to be on a low-fat diet. Remember, breast milk is about 50% calories from fat. So young infants from 0 to 6 months are eating a high-fat diet. That fat is good for them. It helps them be full. It helps them grow a brain. It's got essential fatty acids in it. And so there's so many benefits. But when we start offering complementary foods, we have a lot of power. We can offer straight butter, straight cheese, or we can offer avocado, or healthful sources of fats. So don't go low fat, but aim for healthful fats. So specifics, keep saturated fat down. And I know for a fact that this is not followed by many adults in this country. They feed their kids more foods high in saturated fat. And that may be one of the biggest culprits in the obesity crisis of kids, and the fact that they don't want to eat healthful food. Because you may not like macaroni and cheese, but a lot of people do, and so it's salty and delicious and cheesy, and just nothing else tastes that good after that. So saturated fat, we need moderation just for adults. Some's okay. You can cook your eggs in butter. We don't need to be crazy here, but you don't want to set them up for taste preferences that they can't sustain and be healthy as a growing person. Now, the polyunsaturated fats are these 2 groups here, and I know you guys know this. There's omega-6 fats and the omega-3 fats. The omega-6 fats, the shortest chain. If you don't know this, take your time and write it down. These are the 2 essential fatty acid categories. Omega-6 fats, the shortest one, is linoleic acid. Do you remember what kind of foods the omega-6 fatty acids are in?
Fish?
Oil. Oh.
Oils are good. So oils, vegetable oils are easy. Canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. They're around everywhere. If you eat fried foods in the American diet, you eat way more omega-6 fats than you need. We have plenty of these. Do you remember, you may or may not remember, but the name comes from where the double bond is from the original carbon. So an omega-6 fatty acids, it's 6 carbons over. It's a double bond, okay? And omega-3 fatty acids is 3 carbons over from the methyl group. When we eat these, so if we don't eat essential fats, we can't make products out of them that we need to monitor our health. Okay, so these essential fatty acids actually promote health in many, many ways. We need both groups. We need the omega-6 fats that are found in many vegetable oils and nuts and seeds. And we need the omega-3 fats. These are harder to get. These are the ones, and I have, so you see, darn it, I have 2 categories here. I try to show you, okay, I have alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, and then DHA. Do you remember what that stands for? I left this in there on purpose to help remind you to look it up. What does DHA stand for?
Docosahexaenoic acid.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. So whenever you see an acronym, remember to be able to write down the word. So omega-3 fats, we have the short chain, which is found in so many products. Short chain, alpha-linolenic acid. And then we have the longer chain. There's 2 of them, DHA and EPA, but DHA is the one that we have recommendations for kids. And DHA is found in omega-3 eggs. And so what those are is those are eggs produced from chickens that have probably been fed a certain type of golden algae that produces DHA. So they grow the algae, turn it into chicken food, feed the chickens lay eggs, and the eggs have DHA. Sometimes, just because you might be interested, chickens have even been fed fish meal, all right? So if they're fed fish meal, they can also have more DHA in their eggs, but it's a different source. Who would care? Probably most of the vegans. Okay, vegans would much appreciate having their DHA come from algae, and in most cases, that's the case. There's a few cases where you can look at labels and the source will be menhaden oil or something like that, so you can see that menhaden is a fish. So you can see that it comes from something else, but usually it's from algae. So omega-3 fats come from ground flax seeds. I say ground because if they're whole, we don't really get the fats out of them. We just kind of poop them out. They're more like a fiber, right? In and out, in one end and out the other without being affecting nutrition. DHA, which is the longer chain essential fatty acid in the omega-3 group, is found in eggs, salmon naturally, chunk light tuna, sardines, and other fortified products. In fact, in my refrigerator right now, I have 2% omega-3 fortified milk because I figure it's a way, we don't eat a lot of food, and that's a way to get omega-3 fats. And my husband, we also eat fish. So, but you can buy milk that has DHA in it. Eggs. So these are things that we can do to provide these nutrients to kids. What do I mean by light tuna? I'm missing a word there. Do you know what the difference between chunk light tuna and albacore tuna is? Okay, good. I mean, not good that you don't know, but good. I'm glad I'm asking here. So when you go to the store, a tuna purchase has different ramifications. If it's albacore tuna, that's usually the white meat tuna that's holds together really well, makes wonderful tuna salad and sandwiches. It's got a nice texture. That albacore tuna is often high in mercury. So we don't want to eat a lot of that, especially during developmental stages, such as for women and children. So what we want to do if we're eating tuna is go for chunk light tuna. You look at my picture there, that's what I have. Okay, this is chunk light tuna in water. What that means, it's a fish that's lower in mercury than albacore. So make a note here and say, don't offer albacore. This is lower in mercury than albacore and still a good source of omega-3 fats. Any questions right here? It's a lot of information, but I know you've had the background. So you've had the background of what these types of fats are. And now what we're doing is talking about how do you feed infants and toddlers to promote health. Any questions here? Does this make sense? Okay. I'm going to assume that you're not only completely happy, but giddy with knowledge.
We had a question on what to not offer.
Moderation in all things. When you get to saturated fat, what you don't want to do is have meals full of cheese and sour cream and cream cheese and butter. So that, and I know, I cook all the time, right? And I look at recipes, and oftentimes the ingredients are, well, throw in a tablespoon of butter and do this and do this. And you can do these things without butter. You can do them with olive oil. You can change the entire healthfulness of foods. But our reliance on saturated fat is something you don't want to do. And you get them started on it, and it's delicious. And then it's hard for them to eat something that's just regular food. But if kids are given regular healthy food, they'll like that food too. What you're doing is you are starting the pathway to healthful taste preferences. And I forgot here, nuts and seeds are great. You want to make sure they're not choking hazards, but those are also really good sources for kids and adults. All right, so that's your fat talk. We'll come back to fat again when we talk about pregnancy. Okay, the next part of this lecture is when and what to feed. Okay, so this is Miss Thornton's kid, Rosemary. And so this is in the beginning, and this is what kids look like when they eat. Okay, before I launch into this, I want to take a step back and have you think about what's going on with the infant at these particular ages. Like, why do we not offer food as soon as they're born? Why don't we give them spoons of carrots when they're a week old, right? Why do we have a timetable like this? And what this table shows is the reason why we provide these recommendations when we do. So at birth, all they can do is suckle, right? They can use a bottle or breast, but they're not good for anything else. And at 4 months, there's a lot of development that goes on. And their gastrointestinal tract and kidneys are more mature, but their mouth may or may not be ready. And most guidelines say wait till 6 months. We've talked about this. So you don't want to starve a child that's 4.5 months that acts like he needs to eat, but around 6 months is the way to go. So at this time, during this period of time, things change for them. They develop a lot more awareness. They can move their tongue around mindfully a little bit. Their mouth gets bigger. They can actually take food in their mouth and let it go back. Before this age, they spit out. I'm going to show you a video of that in a minute. But before they're ready, if they're not ready for food yet and you put a spoonful of food in their mouth, they spit it out. Okay, so around 6 months, they get teeth. So the incisors are the front teeth, so they can bite things off. That's good if they want to bite off soft food like a sweet potato, baked sweet potato. It may be scary if you give them a raw carrot, because they could actually bite off the choking hazard. So you want to be careful and give them foods that match their developmental stage that are also safe. Okay, so as they get older, these are the magical years where they actually turn into a person in the family. And some people, I like them back here when they're basically little animals because that's a lot of fun. But here they turn into people. They're more family oriented. They sit at the table. They can self-feed. They can, you can skip the sippy cup thing and they can learn to hold a cup in their hands and consume it. They get molars so they can chew. They learn to move food back and forth in their mouth. And so that's the difference, okay, is what happens from the beginning where they barely have their act together till later. Okay, so with respect to bottle feeding, I will not ask you, I know this is your favorite answer, I will not ask you how many ounces per feeding for these age groups. I give it to you just so you have this, so because you may want to look it up at some point. People want to know if you're working with mothers and maybe you're a lactation consultant or a dietitian and a lactation consultant or working with them, you want to know about how much they should consume per feeding. And this is important because if you're trying to help a mom and she's, I don't think my baby's drinking enough, and then you weigh them and there's an ounce of food transferred during a feeding, like, oh wait, it did work. And so that's why we need those critical scales, and we need to understand that they're not drinking a cup of milk when they're new. So understanding the volume is a big deal, but I won't ask you the exact amount. I want you to know, as we talked about earlier, that their capacity gets larger as they get older. So here, by 5 months, half a cup works during a feeding. Sorry. Okay. Other issues about bottle feeding: don't ever pressure them to finish a bottle. We talked about this before when we talked about how breastfed infants are at an advantage for not becoming overweight. Whether you feed a breastfed or a formula-fed infant with a bottle, don't just let it pour down their throat. Use paced feeding. Remember, where the baby sits up and the bottle is provided in such a way that they have to work on it to get the food out instead of having it pour passively down the throat. I have videos on paced feeding if you didn't take a look before. Don't fill up a bottle. Look at this. If a baby needs 4 to 6 ounces by 5 months, what if you make a bottle that's 8 ounces? And you give it to a sitter or a caregiver? The natural course is for people to feed everything in that bottle to the kid. They feel like they've done the right thing and they've helped feed them, and now they're going to grow. It's all about love. But what's going on here is we're overfeeding kids and we have an obesity crisis, and this is part of the problem. So using paced feeding, where you calmly have them feed, let them, hold them up a little bit. If they're using a bottle, let them not want to drink. Don't pour it down the throat. Let them be done. It's the same thing as breastfeeding. If you're breastfeeding, when they're done, they're not going to keep sucking and get more milk. They're like, I'm tired, I'm done. For bottle feeding, you want to give them that same opportunity to exhibit, I'm done. But pouring it passively down the throat, if you hold the baby on the back and you let gravity feed the bottle, then they can consume too much. Okay, nothing else in the bottle. And I tell you what, one of the more common procedures is to add cereal. So many parents add rice cereal, which is not a good idea, rice cereal to the bottle. And they do it they do it because they want the kid to sleep more. Some kids are bad sleepers and they wake up all the time, and parents think, oh man, if they would just sleep another 2 or 3 more hours, so I'm going to give them rice cereal in a bottle. Well, what happens is, one, it doesn't work. They don't sleep better. And 2, it's a choking hazard. And 3, it doesn't teach them anything about eating. You're slipping by calories, and you want to teach them to eat food from a spoon, not drink it through a bottle. Okay, the last thing is bottles, no juices or sweetened beverages. I don't know, I don't like to judge my fellow man because I actually have an inherent regard for all people that are dealing with what they deal with through walks of life. So it's not a judgmental thing, but I do notice that many people feed juice or sweetened tea or some other items to babies in a bottle, to babies. So it's not a good practice. So if you encounter that, you can explain why, right? You don't want sugar in a bottle because it's too many calories. It can affect their teeth. It displaces breast milk. There's so many reasons why providing another fluid is not a good idea. Are there any questions here? There's a covered a lot here. It kind of pulls together what we've talked about before, but also fleshes out this whole concept of bottle feeding.
I have a question, Dr. Krishna. So, I think last class we talked about rice and how it has arsenic, and so that you recommend oatmeal over rice. But I was wondering about this particular subject with maybe using oatmeal, maybe in the bottle, you know, when the baby's getting a bit older, right before they're about to switch to foods. Would you don't want to do that then?
No, thank you. And I love this question so much because it's making me be specific. And sometimes I think I'm saying exactly what I mean, but when you ask the question, it helps me realize I need to be a little more careful about my answer. So no, nothing else in the bottle is a rule. Not rice cereal, not oatmeal, not something else, you know, nothing else, just breast milk or formula. And so the cereal, doesn't matter where it comes from. I'm not worried about the arsenic here. I'm worried about them choking or adding too many calories to their diets. And it doesn't really work to make them be full. So it's an inappropriate way to feed a child, regardless of what you put in there. Such a good question, Carrie. And the other issue is, we talked about rice and oatmeal, but it doesn't matter. We don't need to be doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay. So age of introduction, this is one of the biggest issues in all of the literature on feeding kids. When do you do it? How do you know when it's the right time? And how do you go about it? Okay, so you do it at around 6 months. You know, 5.5 months is not the end of the world. 5 months probably isn't the end of the world. Before 4 months, we've got some problems. So 6 months is what all the international organizations agree on. I will tell you, in some cases, a little earlier may not be a bad idea. When I bring this up will be when I talk about food allergies. Okay, but just hold on to that thought. I don't want to explain that now and derail the conversation. So right now, around 6 months. Why is breast milk and formula not adequate at this time?
Because the iron stores run out at around 6 months.
Beautiful. Perfect answer. So they're not adequate. They don't promote growth either at this point. They need a different source of calories. So your answer is spot on. Iron, zinc, and other nutrients at this point in time need to be added. Perfect. And that's a nutritional reason. But there's a million other reasons we talked about when I first started, which is that kids learn how to deal with a spoon, deal with the texture, learn about the textures of foods, learn that things are different. They develop autonomy and control over how to eat. They learn that the world is filled with flavors and textures. Now, what's so interesting about this is I have an example from many years ago when I was doing my dietetic internship before all you guys were born. I went to a hospital scenario for pediatric nutrition, and there's a little girl there that she was in the hospital in a crib. She's like 9 months old. She was just so cute. And she had never eaten food because she had to be fed because she had oral issues. Her tongue was too big, that was it. So they had fed her with an NG tube, so a tube that goes up her nasal, goes up her nose and goes into her stomach. And they would feed her passively that way. So she had never actually used her mouth to eat food. And she just hated it. When they were trying to get her over that bridge from going from everything just shows up in your stomach to using your mouth and tasting food, she had no interest whatsoever in doing that. And that's a survival issue. So we have this window of time where around 6 months to the first year where we teach kids and provide opportunities for them to learn about this whole complex issue of food tastes and textures and eating and joy, because we just like, think about a puppy, you know, you can make friends with a puppy if you give them something to eat, right? Kids are like that too. We all like food. We're animals and we need calories and we like food. So anyway, so all of this matters a lot. So what you do is you look for, if you're deciding, is it 4, 5, 6 months? You don't want to go past 6, but you look for, can they sit? Of course, this is one of the most beautiful children on the planet, and he is 6 months old here. This is, I showed him to you last time. He's they popped him in this high chair, IKEA high chair. I think it was like $20. They pop him in there, and look at him. Is he sitting unsupported? Okay, you don't know about his tongue yet, so I'm going to show you that in a minute. But when they fed him, he didn't gag, and he can chew and swallow. And so you look for these abilities. And if you try to start a kid too early, they may not react in a proper way. What happens is you put food in their mouth and they spit it out. So I'm going to show you that video. I'm going to show you 2 videos. So then you start slowly. You give them pureed mashed foods a couple of times a day, get them used to it. If they're full, relax. If they're still hungry, breastfeed their formula, and so on. So then around 9 to 24 months, you have lumpy foods. So they learn to have these different textures. So I'm going to show you him again because, you know. First food.
Is that tasty? You want some more? Just living there. This is out. Okay. Hold it.
So I try to cut out the obscenity there, but
Yeah. Okay. You can't aim, but I can. Mmm. Mmm. More. You're getting full.
okay, so what's going on here is I talked about this last time. We're seeing a responsive parent, which I'm going to use that term in a minute. But you see the kid's in charge. He opens his mouth, and this is his first feeding. So after a while, they learn, oh, wow, I can participate in this process. And pretty soon they want the spoon, and they don't want you to feed them anymore, and then they have to do it, and they get it all in their hair. But the point is that he's ready, sitting up. He's not gagging. He can chew and swallow, and he's ready to go. So here's, if sometimes, can y'all see this okay, my video? Okay.
Whoa.
She's
She's ready
not
to
ready.
brush her 0 teeth.
Wait, we can't see the second video. We saw the first one. We can't
She's
see
like,
the second.
you shoved it too far in your mouth.
Okay, for starters, is she ready to eat? What do you notice about it? It's not ready right off.
Dr. Kershal, we couldn't see the second video. We could see the first one, not the second.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you so much. See it now?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, this is a video from the movie or the extrusion reflex. So watch her for a minute.
Ready to brush her 0 teeth.
Oh, she's like, you shoved it too far in your mouth.
Okay, is she ready to eat? And if yes, why? And if no, why not? Right off on the slide.
No, because she's not able to sit up on her own.
Yeah, she's passively lying back. And parents do this all the time because they don't know any better. She's at 5 months, but look at her, she's not ready.
Wouldn't that be dangerous too? Like if they're not
Hey,
sitting.
she could feed herself already.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna try a really small amount. Okay.
Wash your mouth.
Oh, this is. Does that look okay?
Sure, yeah, whatever.
Look at this. Yeah.
Okay. What you saw there, what'd y'all see?
The extrusion.
So be trained.
Somebody spoke, right?
It didn't look like she was initially opening her mouth. They were just trying to shove it in her
Yeah.
mouth.
And when you put it in there, she spit it out. That's the extrusion reflex. Up until around 4 months, if you put something in their mouth, they spit it out, unless they're suckling, right? So probably keeps them from choking when they're little, but it means that they're too early to feed. Okay, so they just started too early. Okay, this is Ms. Thornton's daughter, Rosemary, and this is showing she's a little bit older. And look how she mashes her hand together. It's called a palmar grasp, where she can pick up food. See, she's not very good at fine motor control, and she's gross. She's covered in a bunch of crap, right? But look at her just grab a handful of food, right? She can feed herself. Actually, that's Willow. Rosemary's a bigger one.
Okay.
Okay, so the point of showing that is to show you what it actually looks like to feed kids, because we don't always know, right? If we don't have that personal experience, we're not used to doing it. If you have a child, you work with parents, all of a sudden there's a game changer and you understand all these issues that are important. Okay, so this is a slide. It's the very end of this presentation before we start on today's. And this, I pulled this out of a current research article because it explains what goes on from month to month, but we're gonna fix it. This is a current article and they're a little bit off. Okay, so 0 to 3 months, 4, 5, 6, we have exclusive breastfeeding. Is that right? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Complementary feeding, starting at 4 months, going on forever. Is that right or wrong?
Too early.
It's probably too early. This was exactly from this 2018 article. It's probably too early, but I have to tell you, there's one exception, and that is if kids, and I'm going to get to this later, and I mentioned it earlier, if kids have a history of severe allergies in the family, sometimes offering those highly allergenic foods early are protective. Okay, so that's the caveat. Allergies, your quote here is, allergies may be different. So normally, put a circle around here and say, this is the normal accepted time for offering complementary foods. What about cow milk? Is that right?
No.
Why not?
After 1 year.
Yeah, so this is 12 months. So yeah, so they're saying at 12 months. So I guess I could have left that out when you just started to hear, but this is what the table said. So this is pretty close. We wait till they're 12 months old or a year. Once they're a year, they're good to go. Why don't we offer cow milk earlier?
It
It's
has
too
less
much
iron,
Protein.
calcium, and protein.
Okay, there's a few answers. I want to hear them all. Somebody pipe up.
There's no iron.
There's not no iron, but it's bad for iron status, but it's very little iron. Perfect. And so why do we care?
Iron's very important in cognitive ability and cognitive development.
Yeah, if we get iron deficient anemia going at this age, we run the risk of lifetime cognitive impairment. So we don't want to start cow milk here. The kids are vulnerable to iron deficiency anemia during these times. So do not want to start early. So 12 months is okay. That's a
Isn't there an issue also with the protein content of milk being too high for
yes.
earlier age ranges?
I love that comment, because what I'm seeing you do is pull together a variety of information to take a whole look at these things. And so that's, we can teach it incrementally, but in the long run, what about cow milk? So you're taking a very good view on this. And how many grams of protein per cup of cow milk?
8.
That's right. How many grams of protein does a 1-year-old need? Close.
7?
Nope.
15?
Close. It's about 13 grams per day. So if they had 2 cups of milk, how are they doing?
Over.
Yeah, and they haven't eaten anything else yet, right? So it's kind of a conundrum here. But we don't want to overfeed. Some cow milk is fine. I'm not on my high horse about this. But they don't need it early because of risk for iron deficiency anemia. And then you don't want to consume a lot because it interferes with their overall nutrition. Cow milk is not the same thing as breast milk. Good answers, guys. Hey,
Now, I have a question about the milk, and I feel like I always bring it up and I think it's just because something that I think a lot of people will ask about. But when it comes to cow milk, I know that in most of or in all of what we've been talking about thus far, the cow's milk is, whole cow's milk. But I'm just kind of thinking and wondering about, I know as you get to different varieties of milk from, skim milks and not and different types and levels of milk, the fat content seems to be the only thing that changes between those. So would it still just be an issue because the protein content is too high, even if you were say for instance, somebody's like, oh, well, I don't give my child whole milk, I give them 2% milk. Would you still say that there'd still be those issues just because the protein content of 2% milk is just as high as whole milk?
My goodness, I love your question again, because you're taking a holistic view of this. And again, it's hard to teach thoroughly just from one slide or something, but it's such a good answer. So cow milk, there's so many questions about it. I've gone to conferences for 30 years watching the best milk researchers in the country and in the United Kingdom and other places fight about, should you give them whole milk? Should you give them 2% milk? When should you do it? What are the issues? So this is such a hot topic. Distilling it down like this is hard to do, but it's needed for an introductory class like this. Okay, so we can be clear that before 12 months is bad because of iron. And then after that, just to get at your question, one of the benefits of whole cow milk, if you're going to give your kid milk, which a lot of people do, at least if they drink whole milk, they get full and they don't eat cookies or some of the garbage items in the house, right? I'm sure that's not an appropriate term for dietetics, but it keeps them away from junk food, right? And studies have shown that if you give them skim milk, it is high. They're probably going to drink more because they don't get full. Therefore, their protein intake is higher, and then they may still eat stuff like cookies. So there's the argument is, what are you going to feed them? And then the other argument is, what if they're overweight? So I'm just telling you that this is a topic that is so interesting. In my graduate class, we have a whole 2 hours devoted to dairy because it's so interesting. The short answer is, from all that I know, what I would say is wait till 12 months. If you want to give them cow milk, go ahead. Give them whole milk. But just don't make it a major part of their diet and calm down. I would have them get used to the taste of other things. Does that answer your question, Shamar? Because it's a good question, but it's complicated.
Yeah, and it definitely gets at it, and that's, leaves room for more research and evaluation. But then I also had something else that kind of popped into my head as I was thinking about it, going back to, introductory of added sugars and stuff like that, because I know that in like cow's milk in particular, it has, I wouldn't say a lot of sugar that comes along with it, but would you say that the sugar content of milk is fine when it comes to, the introductory stages of it into a infant's life?
Yes. So when we talk about sugar, we always try to differentiate between added sugar and natural sugar. So lactose is naturally occurring in milk. However you feel about milk, it does naturally occur. If you gave them chocolate milk, then that's a different thing. Fruit is naturally occurring sugar. So the way the American Heart Association kind of forms it is goes, let's look at natural food sources versus processed foods. And the reason is, if you eat a processed food like a cookie, your blood sugar goes up really high because there's a whole lot of sugar in it, and your glycemic response is not ideal, and so forth. So So the natural occurring of sugar in milk is fine. It's not on the scary list. Adding strawberry flavor is on the scary list.
I have a question about introducing foods early for kids with allergies. Like, what kind of foods would you give them? Would you give them like almond milk if they had like a high risk for like nut allergies or something like that?
Okay, Sydney, so one of my favorite questions, and I'm going to leave you hanging, and you're going to be so excited about the upcoming lecture after you finish this one, because I have one devoted to allergies, and I can't answer that quickly, because allergens are life-threatening, but when and how often and how it's done can change the entire trajectory of their allergic response. But I'm not going to answer this here because I have a whole lecture on it. I'm going to tell you what a food sensitivity is, what an allergen is, how serious it is, and what to do about it. So just hold on to your seat because it's a very cool topic and everybody wants to know about it. Okay, so then the last section is on methods. Well, you can start out with pureed foods, right? And this is 4 months. Is that ideal? No. This is what the article said, but I might just draw a circle around 6 months and go, come on, guys. This is where I would say give this recommendation, but there is flexibility because the world is not often black and white. So you start out for the first couple months with just like pureed carrots. You can buy them, you could make them, pureed cereal, pureed whatever, vegetables. There's all kinds of things. You get your baby food meats, it's open. And then around 8 months, you want to start giving them something with lumps in it. However that works for you, maybe little legumes or beans or something with lumps instead of refried beans. So that why you have to do this is they need to understand that texture in their mouth is fine. And if they don't get this exposure, if you wait too long, and you wait till they're 12 months, they may hate everything with texture, and then you've got a problem on your hands. So we're trying to, this first year of exposure is not just about nutrition, but about learning and neurological development and everything. And then solid foods is when they're pretty much done, they're not babies anymore, and they eat with the rest of the family. The only problem with eating the rest of the family is the family eats foods that are too high in salt and sugar. And so the families, our entire country needs to improve their entire diet. So I'm going to start the next slide because I want to continue. This is the other lecture that I have ready for you. I sent this earlier, so I'm going to start it. Okay, so if you recall in this first lecture we just finished on complementary feeding, there's an outline from covering different aspects of complementary feeding. So we're getting to sample menus. I will not ask you to write a sample menu except to recognize one. Just so you know, this adorable child was my daughter. And even though I obviously didn't have any manners because there's napkins on the table, but she's 35 now. And I didn't know I was a doctoral student. I didn't have enough folic acid with either kid because when I was pregnant, because we didn't know about it then that well. So the world was very different at that point of view, but at least we were eating spinach and corn and beans, so there's that. But the world has changed. We know a lot more. And I show this picture. These are kids that are involved in preparing food. One of the best things you can do with kids is get them in the kitchen right away. My son loved it. He's cooks now. He's a chef as part of one of his skill set. But from the get-go, he liked cutting, which, pros and cons, cutting food and fire and cooking. And so you can get kids involved. And so they're not victims of processed food, they're engaged in making real food. So there's a lot of complex things. So this is a slide, and I will not ask you this, so I know everybody's going to put the excerpt, but people need to know how to give advice. So I want you to have this as an example of a meal pattern. So 0 to 5 months, nothing, right? Just breast milk or formula. 6 to 11 months, this is when you start. What do you start with? Well, you can try the infant cereal, such as iron fortified oatmeal. And then as you slowly add foods, see how they respond. So these are nice, healthy foods, rich in iron. Okay, so this is breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So here's another example with more dairy products, vegetables, and fruits. Okay, snacks, same kind of thing. These patterns come from the child, and I'm not going to ask you this, but child and adult care feeding program. A lot of child care centers can offer foods and get reimbursement for the foods they offer to kids if they follow certain patterns. So this is the kind of thing that the guidelines would say, you need to offer this. I have done research in child care centers and seeing that instead of following these guidelines, oftentimes there's a very strong dependency on crackers, Cheerios, chips, goldfish, things that come packaged, salty and packaged, cheap, easy to give to kids. And so giving them things like vegetables and fruits is harder to do. So what you want to do is try to offer a variety of foods during these ages. Here's another example menu. And again, I do this because people need to know what a menu looks like. So here's a kid, rice, cereal, banana, mashed fruit. Lunch could be a whole grain cereal, peas, carrots. These are little guys, right? 6 to 8 ounces, unsweetened applesauce, and so on and so on. So notice these are mostly real foods, and they're not macaroni and cheese and Pop-Tarts. Finally, and I won't ask you this either, I just want to provide it to you. Here's an example of meal patterns that are used. Instead of telling you what foods, it just says, well, at breakfast, give some milk, give some vegetable, give some fruit, give some grains. At lunch, give whole milk, give some meat, right? So they have patterns to go by. So kids get a variety of foods from each of these groups in the child care setting. Now, what I have seen in my research is that it's all over the board. Some centers have really healthy items here, and some centers lean towards more processed, salty foods. So that's always room for improvement.
I have a quick question that, again, just kind of popped into my head. And I know we're talking about specifically things that are nutrient dense, but I know that previously we were talking about, the potential harmful effects of, adding too much water into the diet of the child, where instead of them getting, the nutrients that they need from the breastfeeding and things of that nature, they're more so getting their stomachs filled with just water, which doesn't, bring a lot of nutrition to the table, or really much of really any. But would you say that there is a comfortable time where water needs to be, integrated into the diet of a like more so than just, milk and then all the other solid foods?
It's so funny because on my water slide in the past, I remodel these every semester, try to make cleaner and prettier and all this kind of stuff. And then my water slide from the infant nutrition, I always said when solid foods start is when you offer water. So thank you, everybody. Write in giant letters, once they start eating food, they need water. So they learn to drink water from a cup. You don't have to do a sippy cup or anything like that. Thank you. That's such a good question.
Yeah, and like when I thought of it, I was like, well, this is, I thought it would be obvious, but again, I think that, when you look at all the information and then you hear, oh, well, water, has this effect on the early stages of, infancy, then it's like, okay, when do I want to start promoting, hey, a little bit less of just drinking milk every single day, a little bit more of incorporating in water and stuff like that.
You're right. When you start eating food, go to water. You can have milk, but absolutely water. In fact, in Texas, you better. So thank you. I took it out of my slide. It's so funny. Every now and then, like once every 2 seconds I mess up, but I'll fix that past slide and I'll send you guys an announcement about water. So it's on the books.
There was a question in the comments on lumpy or solid food. Like when they start eating what kind of food?
The table back there said around 8 months you want to start lumpy stuff.
No, for water. Like
water's not lumpy.
No, when they start when they start eating lumpy or solid food, like when do they need water?
Anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was being a jerk. Okay. how to feed them. So there's two theories that are both appropriate, that fall all the way through the literature on how to feed kids. It's how to feed, not just what. We've got the what down and, spoon and here's what and all this kind of stuff. So how do you do it? Well, in the past 3 or 4 years, we've had this big emphasis on your demeanor, your relationship. What does a parent do? What does a kid do? So a lot of us have these memories. Well, when I was a little kid, my parent made me sit at the table till I ate tomatoes, or made me sit there till I finished my plate. And so we have these traumatic stories, right, where parents are trying to make their kids be healthy, kids don't want to eat it, and there's been a disconnect between doing, how to do that. So there's a couple of theories, and these are very well thought out theories, and I want to make sure you're exposed to both of them. One is called the division of responsibility. This is a term you need to know. It is coined and developed by Ellen Satter. She has her master's in nutrition. She has an entire business around teaching families how to feed their teaching parents how to feed their kids and how to have family interactions around food and prevent eating disorders. She's got a rich, rich reputation. This is a hot link to her site. So just bringing this up, but I wanted to distill out what she talks about. So the definition is a division of responsibility in feeding encourages you to take leadership with what, when, and where of feeding. So the parent, that's your job. What are you going to give them? When are you going to do it, right? You're in charge. They don't know when to eat. So you got to set up meal times. And where are you going to do it? And then your child determines how much and whether they're going to eat what you provide. This is a mutual respect. You put out the food. Your responsibility is to make it available and set up structure. And your child gets to decide how much and whether. So this applies at every stage. You feed them on demand. If they're hungry, let them determine when they're full. And if they become better at their eating patterns, you take on less responsibility and let them develop some autonomy. Okay, so this is a little more detail. What's a caregiver supposed to do in this case? Choose and prepare the food. Regular meals and snacks. Make eating times pleasant. I can't tell you how many times over the years that just 1 or 2 students in a class will go, well, I won't eat at the table because it's the worst thing that ever happened to me, right? So we have a lot of trauma sometimes around the table, but most literature shows families that eat together as a family have healthier habits, or the kids are less likely to fall off the deep end as teenagers and all those things. So regular meals are great. And you want to be pleasant. This is not the time where you pick on people. This is actually the time where you go, how was your day? How did school go? What did you do right? What did you do wrong? What did you learn? What do you want to do? Just kind of dining. This is an art we used to have that's really fun if you want to step back up to that. So then what you're doing is you're illustrating to your child how to behave at family mealtime. You're pleasant, you're eating, you're enjoying each other's company, you're not wolfing down food, you're not trying to get down real fast, and you're considerate, but you're not catering to their likes and dislikes. Like if they go, well, I hate broccoli, you don't get up and run and get them something else. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but you have some other things to try. So don't give them foods and beverages between meals, because you ruin the whole thing if you do that. You ruin their appetite. If they're not hungry for a meal time, they're never going to try new foods. And let your child grow as they're going to. So you have to trust the child. Eat the amount of food he needs. Learn to eat the food that you eat, so you provide meals. Grow predictably in a way that is right for him, and learn to behave well. So you have to trust the child to do this instead of controlling. It's complicated for people, and it's not always easy to pull off, but it can derail a lot of personal issues that end up having, emotional issues that end up going around the dinner table. Okay, so one more term, and so I will cover this term, and then that will be where our cutoff for the exam is. There's another term. So Ellen Satter's term is division of responsibility. This other term about how to feed kids is also a coined term that has grown in respect. This is called responsive parenting, and it's not all that different than what Ellen Satter says. You know, it addresses that these first 2 years really matter, and kids can't tell you what they're thinking if they like food. They can only show you with their body language. And so a responsive parent is someone that's looking to their infant for signals, respecting those signals. If the infant's full, then they go, we're done. If the infant wants more food, you give them more food. If you think a kid is gaining too much weight and they want more, more baby food, give them more baby food. Let them trust you and you trust them, and their growth and their food issues will be much better. So some key steps, and these are a lot of words. They pretty much describe what I already said, but the kids are hungry, you're nice about it. They show hungry, put them at the table. You know, be predictable. Make sure they know that they can stop feeding when they want to. When they're done, let them get down. You know, so it's a common sense way of feeding kids, and just a lot of us haven't had training on this, so it's really helpful for families. So here's an overview. I made this just to kind of pull all these things together. When you're thinking about mealtime, they're going to learn to self-feed, healthy foods, have the baby at the table. Notice these kids are all at the table. I have pictures of, because I used to spy on people, there are restaurants where everybody's sitting around eating, and they have a baby in a high chair looking at a video game and eating by themselves, right? So we've kind of lost the art sometimes of family being together, or the parents are looking at a video, everybody's looking at their screen, but that's another story. So anyway, mealtime, we have a lot of power here to have really fabulous family experiences. So no TV, no salt, or not extra salt. And this is the last slide I'm going to talk about. This is non-responsive feeding. So instead of being responsive to your kid, what can happen if you're not? You're not paying attention to them. Like, instead of listening, are you hungry, or you're full, the caregiver goes, you have to eat. Finish your food, you have to finish your food. You've got 3 minutes. If you don't finish your food, then they bribe you, okay? If you don't finish your food, you can't watch TV. If you finish your food, then you get to do this. And then they try to override their hunger and satiety signals, and they're just trying to feed them. It's not like they're bad, they just don't have the training. And then what happens is kids develop poor dietary habits, and they don't learn to get full, recognize when they're hungry, recognize when they're full, and then empower themselves to stop. Sometimes they take over and they eat a bunch of sugar, and sometimes there's a big disconnect between parents and the kids. One more thing not to do is to bribe. If kids are upset, don't go, I know you're crying, but here's a cookie. I mean, I know we all kind of do that sometimes, but it's not a really good way to train